That's right, Steve. I think that there is an extraordinary level of anxiety when it comes to what the chattering class in Washington about just what could possibly happen in this one-on-one meeting between President Trump and President Putin. A lot of people are questioning the president's methodology here because on the one hand, as you know, he's been being pretty harsh with a lot of his NATO allies, with EU allies as well over the last several days leading up to this meeting with Mr. Putin. And now the Democrats on Capitol Hill in particular are saying, hey, you've got to really hold him to account here. You've got to put his feet to the fire, particularly when it comes to the indictment of these 12 Russian intelligence officers. I mean, there are talks even of extradition. The big question, of course, is going to be, what actually can be accomplished in a meeting that they're refusing to even call a summit, and that the president, even himself, has set pretty low expectations for. But I want to focus a little bit on what we've heard from him over the last 24 hours in terms of what he's been saying about his NATO allies and his EU allies. Let's listen in.
I think we have a lot of foes. I think the European Union is a foe, what they do to us in trade. Now, you wouldn't think of the European Union, but they're a foe. Russia's a foe in certain respects. China's a foe economically, certainly. They're a foe. But that doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean anything. It means that they're competitors.
That was really just the latest barrage, the latest salvo from the U.S. president toward the EU and, of course, toward NATO allies as well. And the question, of course, going forward is, he's lumping them now in with Russia and China when it comes to, quote, foes and adversaries, certainly with the issue with regards to trade. But, of course, the bigger question going forward is, does that mean that the relationship is destroyed? And, of course, earlier this morning, the president already tweeting here from Helsinki, he was talking about those indictments, but he also referenced NATO allies and how great that meeting, he characterized it as a great meeting. He said basically that NATO allies had been calling him, leaders of these countries calling him and essentially saying thank you for really, focusing in on the need to spend more and really, basically making that relationship even stronger than it has been in the past, and that he characterized press reports as wrong. And so it was interesting to note that while he's hitting out against these supposed allies and EU leaders, at the same time, he's undercutting them, but at the same time, he's coming out and tweeting and saying that everything is great. Now, over the next 30 minutes, we're going to see the president and Mrs. Trump head out from, they're basically going to head out to the presidential palace. They're going to meet with Finland's president. Of course, that could be an interesting meeting as well, of course, knowing that Finland is, of course, a member of the EU. So a lot to watch out for, guys.
OK, thank you very much indeed for that. Hadley, I just want to say, look, if he has encouraged EU leaders to send up to 2%, possibly going even beyond that, of course, a 4% figure of GDP was mentioned as well. Presumably this is going to play very badly with Mr. Putin, who, although is rearming with modern equipment, the Russians as well, last thing they want from their fiscal point of view, even though we've got higher oil prices at the moment, is an arms race with Europe and with NATO as well. Presumably this is something that's going to come up.
Oh, absolutely, because you have these historical grievances, don't you? And certainly the Russian president is going to have to bring that up when we talk about Crimea, when we talk about increasing troops along the border in Eastern Europe. This is something that they push back against. Remember, even here in Finland itself, more than a year ago, there were questions over whether or not NATO troops could potentially be stationed in Finland, even though Finland, of course, is not a member of NATO. They are, a partner country. So it's interesting to note that, he pushed back on that there and said that Russia would take action if something like that actually happened. So they're going to definitely have to talk about that. And certainly they're going to have to talk about Syria. And the question, of course, is anything going to move in terms of these indictments of these 12 Russian intelligence officers, guys? Hey, everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now, to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.